Okay, we'll take you on a little tour this morning. January the 19th, it's -4 degrees in Ilkeston, really cold, crisp morning. I'm going to take you up East Street and a little walk around the marketplace, see some of the buildings and some of the history of the buildings. So starting off here, we have the Bailey's Memorials, 1890. This cottage you can see in front of me and the one adjacent to it, and Horton and Moss. This is a 3-storey building. They're probably some of Ilkeston's oldest buildings. They've been around since the sort of mid-18th century, so really old. If you wind the clock back 200 years ago, you would have heard the clattering of the stocking frames and the weavers down this row. It was quite a busy location within Ilkeston. This road was formerly called Bull Street before it was East Street. Bull Street led down, as we can see there, down to the bottom of Bull Street, around the corner, and that led down to Bulwark and the North Field. This was one of the primary roads that led into Ilkeston back in the day, one of the thoroughfares. So walking up past the 3-storey building of Horton and Moss. And on the south side of East Street, we've got the old wine vaults and Captain Gregory's. Captain Gregory's Park used to be an old spring factory back in the 50s and 60s that made car seats and mattresses and anything to do with springs, basically on wire, if people remember that. This is the wine vault building. This is the original doorway that led out onto East Street, but this was condemned due to many accidents back in the day where people would have fallen down and injured themselves. So the doorway was actually moved around onto its west side and was accessed via these steps now. This has recently been turned into accommodation. Okay, swing round, we've got the hair and body surgery. Again, a plot of land. This would have originally been occupied with 3-storey buildings, similar to what you see at Horton and Moss. Okay, East Street was known for its ill repute. There were brothels around in this area, and one of them stood in this exact location here as a 3-storey building. We can see here. You've got the Lloyds Bank on the corner. Opened in 1927 as a Derby Savings Bank. Now, previous to that, we had doctor's surgery, Dr. Wood's surgery, a solicitor's, and a butcher's underneath, and to the right hand side we had the Liberal Club. Well, 3 of those buildings were removed to actually make way for the Derby Savings Bank. On the opposite side of the road, on East Street, on the junction of East Street and Bath Street, we have the Borough. The Borough building, we believe, dates back to about 1887. Before it was the Borough, we had 5 separate businesses here. 3 on the East Street side, which you can probably tell now. 4 of those windows there would have been the first building. The second building would have been in the next 2 windows, and the end windows would have been in the furthest building away. George Small operated on the corner as a butcher on the corner of that street. Now, funnily, if you look up on the corner there where we've got the poplar, the facade is pretty much the same as you go around the corner, and it's also the same on the adjacent Bargain Booze building, which is very strange. Now, I can only assume that it was the same builder who built all of these buildings. I can't imagine that the end building, where we've got big discount bargain and booze and sweets, was actually part of the pub at one time. Now, if you wind the clock back to the 1890s, the actual borough was actually called the New Inn. So we had 2 New Inns operating on Bath Street at one time. This one on the corner of East Street, and we also had the one halfway down Bath Street. So 2 New Inns at one particular time. Okay, I'll turn around, walk over towards the bank. So we're now on the lower marketplace. If I turn around now, we're looking at the Harrow Inn. The original Harrow Inn was demolished in around 1887, I believe. It was more square fronted on the front. The reason it was demolished because there was actually thinking ahead with the tram system that was actually put in place in 1903 that ran up the marketplace and across the marketplace and down South Street and went off in various directions. The pub was actually demolished and rebuilt with a radius on it. The original building wouldn't look very nice at all. So it's actually demolished and rebuilt, and this is how we see it today. There had been an accident on the corner with the previous building there, with a young girl being hit by a horse and cart on the bend. Again, another reason for why they actually rebuilt this building and put a bend on there. It's prettier than the original building anyway. The yard that runs up the side of it, St Mary Street, dates back to about 1779, I believe. Again, this was an area where there was quite a lot of activity in the day to the rear of the Arrow, where we had lots of festivities, circuses and things going on for the general public, so it was quite a busy area back in the day. Okay, we'll move on to the next building, Arena Hope. A lot of people may have remembered it being graves, and it's also been a few chemists in its day, mainly chemists. This is probably on the north side of the marketplace. This is the newest of all the buildings. This dates back to 1875. Now, it could possibly have been two buildings at one point, and we know that because we've been down in the cellars underneath, and due to the layout of the cellars, it would actually depict that this could have been actually two different buildings. So this is a newer one at 1875. We have the building next door, which I find one of the most interesting buildings in Ilkeston, with the fancy windows above. Again, this is not one, we've been in the building, and I've been in the building adjacent to it, which was Bestwick's. Never been underground in these ones, so we don't know the cellar system in there. We've been researching a lot of this as part of our Ilkeston subterranean project, but this one we've not been underground. Strangely, if you go in the Bestwick's building, which is to the left, the whiter building, and you go on the first floor, there's some trapdoors, like 3 trapdoors that drop down onto the ground floor, which is a bit unusual. Again, it's a strange building. People are led to believe that the doorway that you can see on the right hand side there may have been part of the original butter market that once stood on the marketplace. Not sure about that though, can't confirm the age. Okay, these buildings have changed significantly. As you can see there, the window on the left hand side between William Hill and there, that was originally a doorway. So the facades have changed significantly on all of these buildings. Move on to William Hill and the eye below. Again, very old buildings. We had Bestwick's that operated from here, that were in there for the best part of probably 70-80 years. Facades on these didn't change at all, so if you look back at photographs from the early 1900s, they are pretty much as they are today. Walking up towards Eclipse here, most people will probably remember this as being Barton's back in the day. Again, pretty much the building as you see today is as it was, pretty much unchanged. They've lost the second floor. I interviewed the lady who ran the Barton's fruit shop, and she was informed by her father back in the day that the top floor was removed due to a bad omen. Now we've heard that bad omen could have been the fact that there was a lady who lived there at the time by the name of Ruth Wright with her son, who committed suicide in 1939. Now, she wasn't told that by her father, but with the research that's ever since, and that seems to be the case. So that was probably one of the reasons why the upper floor on what was Barton's has now been removed. The walkway across was never a walkway, it was actually used to address the public up until around 1868. The walkway went from the second floor of the Market Inn building, and it went out onto the walkway. It didn't actually go across into the building opposite. You've then got the Market Inn. Interesting, the Market Inn facade, you've got the same facade across the Market Inn and across Shakers. Now, these buildings were built by the same person, Jedediah Wrigley, in 1843. He also built the building on the right, which was talking about Barton's. Hence the reason why they may be connected via the walkway between the two buildings. Now, up until around 1890, the Market Inn was only the area to the rear of what is now the right-hand side of the Market Inn. So if you look at the right-hand side of the Market Inn, the actual pub was on the right-hand side, the Market Inn Tavern. The front part, and we can just see the doorway there, that was owned by Jedediah Wrigley's daughter, Sophia Wrigley. She had a hosiery shop in their business. So the hosiery business was at the front, the pub was at the back, and then next door what we see is now the double fronted building of the Market Inn. We're not quite sure the history of that building, but obviously these were separated. So we're looking at this building there with the double doors on it. Not quite sure. We've not found any records of actually what existed in that building. All the facades on these were changed in around 1890-ish, because they were totally different. The roof lines were different. There is a photograph in existence from 1878 where it shows the roof lines, and they are, some of them are sloping actually in the opposite direction, so you can see that the lines have changed significantly since then. Okay, then we move on to the Shakers building. Shakers building has been owned by Dolly Richards as a hairdressers back in the day. You have also had a bookmakers in their various buildings. Shakers and the Market Inn are now part of the same building. Again, they were built by Jedediah Wrigley as one building, but they are now part of that same building anyway, because they've knocked through to gain access to that building. The access wouldn't have actually been there originally. The Queen's Council, that's been a bank. It's been Robinson's Solicitors, it's been lots of things. Now the Robinson's building, or the Queen's Council as we know it, now shut. It's going to be turned into an arcade in the very near future. That's in the process. Queen's Council was actually two buildings split pretty much the right side and the left side. The double doors that you can see in the middle, there were no double doors there. That was a single door that led straight through to the back of the building to a row of cottages. So it was basically an access point. So you walk straight through the middle of the building, and originally there would have been a door on this right hand side of the Queen's Council for access to the right hand building, and a door on the left hand side. And again, this can be seen with the cellars, because they have two separate cellar systems there, which would have been for each one of those buildings. So this one's changed quite significantly over the years. The King's Head, the oldest on the north side of the marketplace, dates back to 1835. It was originally run by a gentleman by the name of Mark Woodruff. This has changed massively over the years. We believe that there may have been sort of a main room that ran across the front, left to right, which was the main room for the events, the music and everything. On the rear it's been extended significantly backwards, so that's changed quite a lot. Again, this is 1835. We're assuming the Queen's Council would have been a similar age. The Market Inn we know is 1843, and looking down Eclipse around past where Bestwick's was and round to the corner, we're assuming they're a very similar age in the 1840s. And then, as I mentioned, you've got at the start, we've got Arena Hope, which is 1875, which was basically an add-on, and then you've got the Arrow, which is about 1887, the current build. Okay, if I turn round, walk up towards the gap, towards Pimlico, between the King's Head and the Sir John Warren. Just got to watch the sun, because the sun's very bright today, so make sure we don't blind ourselves. Okay, through the gap there we've got Scaler on Burn Street. This was built in 1933 on the site of the Burn Street Chapel graveyard. Some say this place is haunted. That can be anyone's guess if you believe it. The chapel is still to the rear, which you can just see down Burn Street. That is now accommodation, been turned into flats. So Ilkeston, the scale is 1913. I think it's one of the longest running purpose-built cinemas that is still going to this day. We did have a few more in Ilkeston. We had the Globe in 1915, I believe it was, and we also had, or should I say, no, it wasn't the Globe. The other cinema we had was King's in 1915, and then the Globe in about 1918. So moving on to the Sir John Warren. The Sir John Warren dates back to about 1791. It started off basically as 5 buildings. We've got the left hand side of the Warren, which you can see there with the main doorway and the windows either side of the main doorway, and you've got the area to the right, which were 2 separate cottages. To the rear in the beer garden there was also, or what is now the beer garden, was 2 separate cottages which were flattened, and then there was a stable that was built on the back of there, or a barn, which is listed as grade 1. That's on the rear. So the original part of the building is in front of us, which dates back to around 1791, and it was Isaac Attenborough who opened it in 1791. The building could be considerably older than 1791, but it's 1791 as a pub as we know it. The two houses to the right hand side, which I was talking about earlier on, these have also been converted. These were houses converted to extend the pub. So the original pub was on the left hand side, extending rearwards, and then obviously we've got this right hand side, which has also been extended rearwards as well in the past few years. Okay, we have the town hall, built in 1868, pretty much as it was back in the day. Obviously there's changes inside, on the inside. You've got changes on the south side facing the old co-op, where they have extended outwards and rearwards. The windows on the front, which you can see is glass. This is a bit of a difficult one to explain, but where the glass is in the windows, these were voids, these were open, and there was a walkway down the back of there that ran across the front of the building in line, I'm assuming, with what is now the front door. So that was an open space across the front. These were then filled in, obviously gaining room in inside the rooms to the inside of there, extending forwards. Quite an interesting building. The archway, which you can see, I don't know if you can see up here, but there are actually some marks in the stonework. I'll try and explain what that is. You can just make that out. Okay, down the walkway, back in 1920, at the back of what is now the town hall, was the old fire station, which stood pretty much opposite the Ilkeston police station. Now obviously that was pulled by horse and cart. The pumping mechanism was, and it pulled down this yard, and it actually abraded some of the stonework as it came through, because it only just fitted through the gap. So that's the reason why those stones are marked up. Obviously in later years the fire station disappeared, and then we had the site of the swim baths at the back, which people probably used, are on this site. The open air baths, which was quite a stark reminder for many people going in there in the cold winter weather. That disappeared then, and then obviously we had the Victoria baths that opened up in 1971 at the top of Manners Road. Okay, moving round now, we'll go around towards the apologies for the bad cough. We're going to move around to the Ilkeston Co-op. Great building, now all changed. We've got Coffee Vida in there, Best Shop, quite a few different things are set up in there over the years. Now the Ilkeston Co-op originally was opposite Ogarth's, and it was extended up until the corner of this Warncliffe Road in about 1937. When they demolished the buildings that stood there before, you had the old post office, which was actually classed as South Street address. You had Joseph Wright's hairdressers, which was number one, the marketplace, and next door to that you had the Bonbon shop. They were all demolished to make way for the Co-op, being driven up to the corner of Warncliffe Road in 1937. Okay, you have the library over on the south side of the marketplace, which you can see there. The lighting again isn't very good. The corner cafe on the far side. And then go to St Mary's. St Mary's Church was built in around 1150. The chancel was extended forward in 1909-1910. That was actually brought forward by around 45 feet to extend the chancel for the seating arrangement. You've got the Cantaloupe Centre that stands just to the rear of there, that I'm assuming was built in the late 60s, early 70s. It's not the prettiest looking building on the back, but that is what we used to call the Cantaloupe Centre. Okay, we'll walk back down. We're actually stood at the moment, where I'm stood filming at the moment, I'm on the site of the old boys' school that once stood on the marketplace. And behind me, between here and the library, we have the old girls' school. Okay, that later became the market hall. So we're walking down now, back towards the lower marketplace. You've got the old power supply on your right hand side on the corner that would have been to power the old tram system from 1903 to 1931. People probably walk past this not realising what that actually is. Between this buttress, you can see near the sign on the right, and the next buttress where the current toilets are, we used to have some underground toilets there that was installed in 1899, and they were taken out of service in 1930. They were actually discovered in 1993 when they repaved all of the marketplace. So they were uncovered and quickly covered up again and backfilled to prevent anyone seeing them, and unfortunate really, but they actually stood between this pillar here and the pillar over there. Where the toilets are now, we had the original butter market that stood there. Ugly looking building apparently. It had a lock-up on the right hand side, a cell for condemning people for being naughty on the right hand side, and the butter market underneath that was used for selling the goods. Above there was the Smedley School, free school, that stood actually above the butter market. That became, that was not used once the actual schools were built on the marketplace for the boys in 1865. Then can we turn around, we've got the vicarage that stood in the corner, still stands today, but it's not the original vicarage, it's been rebuilt over the years. And ending off on the lower marketplace, we have the observatory building. As you see, the walls on the right hand side of the observatory would be the original walls of what was Quicksave, which was built in around 1965. Say Quicksave, it actually started off as a P&D store, then became Quicksave. The observatory obviously then took over, I think it was towards the back end of the 90s, and became a pub. If we wind the clock back to the 1791, what stood on this corner here of the observatory was the original Anchor pub. Which it was then converted into the Liberal Club that also stood on the corner. There was a facade change and a few internal changes, but other than that it was pretty much the same building. So that's where the Anchor was. We also had the Anchor pub where the Bull's Head pub is as well, on Little Allam Hill. That was actually older than this Anchor pub. I think that dated back to about 1780, and then changed names in around 1790 to the Bull's Head as we know it today. So that's where the Anchor pub stood, with Dr. Wood's surgery next to it and the solicitors. So that is your quick walk around the marketplace on this cold morning. So it's -4 degrees, struggling a bit with the old hands holding the camera, but I hope you've enjoyed the walk.